Welcome to the Lakeville Library Trustees monthly meeting. It's Thursday, January 14th, 2021. In accordance with the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A through 20, related to the 2020 novel coronavirus outbreak emergency, the January 14th, 2021 public meeting of the Lakeville Library Board of Trustees shall be physically closed to the public to avoid group congregation. However, to view this meeting in progress, please go to http://facebook.com/LakeCAM. And you do not need to have a Facebook account to view the meeting. This meeting will be recorded and available to be viewed at a later date at http://www.lakecam.tv. And I think maybe that is that hashtag or something like that. I don't know. So we're open. We're going to have the secretary's report. Is there a motion to waive the reading and approve the minutes since we have minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, we're going to do a roll call vote of waiving the reading of the approved December 9th, 2020 minutes as received. So the roll call vote, Rich LaCamera,
Aye.
Ruth Gross,
Aye.
Nancy LaFave, aye. The motion passes. We're going to go.
Madam Chair, Sean, is the chat feature on?
Yeah, I'm looking at Facebook, so I'll put the comments from Facebook on in the chat.
Okay, thank you. You're all set, Nancy.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. The next item of business is the financial report.
So I provided you an update of the fiscal 21 budget as of for January. And I have nothing to report or say about it. We're just over the halfway mark for the year. I have no concerns about the lines. Everything is pretty much where it should be in terms of spending. I don't know if you had any particular questions.
My question is always water, the water service.
The
in
water
terms of
service is fine
irrigation.
because there was a town meeting article to cover that, and what's remaining should be more than adequate to cover the regular expenses. Because at this point, we're just running on, sinks like hand washing and whatever is produced by the bathrooms. So it should be fine for the rest of the year. There's a little bit here depending on when the system gets opened. Usually that doesn't happen until, I don't know, sometime in May, and then we don't see that use really until the July bill anyway, which will be the following fiscal year. But there is money to cover that as well if we end up on.
Are we going to be using Taunton's water, or are we going to be using Loon Pond's water?
Actually, Stearns Irrigation just came this morning to take a look at the radio boxes and take them out to, I think, send them back to the manufacturer to have them looked at in terms of getting that signal from here over to the camp. So I think that's the long range plan, but whether or not it'll be successful and or done in time for the season opening, it's only January now, so I don't really know, but I think the long range plan is to go back onto the camp water, but we'll see.
Does anyone have any other questions about the financial report? Okay, moving on to the director's report, program and services and collection.
Yep, so December, for obvious reasons, was a much quieter month than usual. Usually this is when we have some of our larger community-wide events like the gingerbread house making and New Year's Eve, but with the COVID restrictions, we couldn't do any of those things this year. but we are still working behind the scenes and doing programming online for folks. So that's going to remain online until further notice. So Miss Teresa is still doing story time for young children and their families on Zoom, and book shares for different age groups. She's working on 3 virtual game nights for the spring. So each of these nights are going to feature a different type of game facilitated by gaming professionals. So February will feature some camp type games for families. In March, she has a Fortnite competition planned. And Fortnite is a popular video game, so it's kind of for that age group. And so this will be for teens, tweens, and young adults. And then in April, there'll be a trivia night for families, so all ages can participate in that. In addition to our regular book club, we are also planning for a Zoom presentation again by Ted Reinstein. So he's a news reporter that was for many years on WCVB's Chronicle, and he's adapted his in-person presentations to the Zoom environment, and will be taking folks on a road trip. It's called No Mask, No Gas Required. So he is doing similar to what he usually does in person, and talks about some of the places he's visited over the last 20 some odd years of reporting all over New England, but it will be done in the Zoom environment. And as far as library services, we have people, coming in and using the collection, taking things home. We're still offering curbside pickup, and we encourage anybody who is unable to wear a mask or does not feel comfortable coming into the building to take advantage of that. We're still answering questions online and over the phone too for folks. So we are still here providing services for the community.
Any questions of Jamie? Okay, then can we talk about building and grounds?
Yeah, I have no problems to report. The updates with the irrigation radio boxes is really the only news I have. So that's sometimes no news is good news, right?
One of the things I think you commented on in a previous meeting was having the roof checked for issues because of the age, and also we had issues a number of years ago where we had freezing taking place over the portico,
Mhm.
and to see if there was any other issues with breakage in the shingles or anything like that, because it's going into the 16th year, almost the 17th year of the roof. So is that something for when the weather gets a little bit warmer, or?
Well, he went up, the town carpenter went up after we had a snow event. I guess it was the end of October, and we had some water coming in when it was, I guess, thawing out, whatever the snowpack was up there. And at this point, we haven't had any subsequent episodes, but there was nothing obvious, but whether or not an overall health check could be done. So we haven't had any other episodes since that one at the end of October. But I think overall there is some concern. We have some spots where they've traditionally been problematic. So we just need to keep an eye on that.
Anybody have any questions on building and grounds?
I guess the only question, as far as the foyer is concerned, that has been fixed and we haven't had a problem with that at all, right?
Right. No,
Okay.
it's like the spots, what happens when we have any kind of episode is it can't really be identified to any particular spot. There's just some water that's making its way in. Nate described it as like the way that the roof is. It's like some kind of plywood with filler in between. So where we see water dripping is not necessarily where it's coming in. It's potentially just making its way in somewhere and then kind of moves down and then presents itself in one spot. So I think this is going to be something that we're going to be chasing for, depending on the weather, depending on how much snow ends up in there, depending on how it melts. There's not a way to pinpoint any particular location or spot. I think we're just going to have to keep an eye on it.
And there's been no further issues with the hallway where we've had issues with that and going into the YA room? There's nothing everything seems to be taken care of there, right? For, at
Mhm.
least for the time being,
Right.
because I think it's leaked 3 times, but that was a
Yeah, I think, I honestly think that
mechanical issue.
How's that
that's-
pipe?
it's more, it's HVAC. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is some of, so like there are a couple of spots that are HVAC related, and then a couple of spots to keep an eye on that are potentially roof related.
Any other questions? We go on to gifts and endowments, bricks.
Bricks
I
are
don't
in.
Pardon me?
I just said the bricks are in. The
Oh,
last
I'm
order
sorry.
of bricks
I thought you said
has
Rich.
been
I'm
put in
sorry.
the, and I haven't received any orders for bricks since then.
They'll be installed in the spring.
No, they're in. They're
in?
in the,
Oh,
yeah.
they're in. Literally,
bricks
they're
have-
here and they're inserted. Okay,
yeah.
okay, great. We still need to make sure that we keep the edge, there's some green edging towards the area which has the cove, the curved wall in front of the local history room, out from the
Mhm.
local history room. There's an issue there around the corners, where that greenery needs to be really chopped back too, so that the next time we have somebody doing some landscaping, if they could just keep cutting it back, because it just keeps growing. So I don't really know, other than removing the actual pieces of shrubbery that are there. They overshadow at least the first layer of the bricks when some of them are engraved.
Right.
Any other questions? Great Ponds Gallery. Ruth?
Oh, I think that's you. The gallery is doing fine. We had a, it's really a matter of doing a slide puzzle for fitting in all the artists with the new dates. And our artists have been very kind to make changes, and we try to reciprocate by giving them a little extra time. Right now, you, Nancy, and Jamie are working on the 15th anniversary exhibit. So I'll let you tell us about that.
Jamie and I met this week to go over some of the things that we had used in the other 2 anniversaries, the 5th and the 10th. So we're going to move forward to hang the exhibit next Friday, which we're closed. And I would really like to do, we've always done birthday cake to celebrate the different anniversaries, but I was thinking if we did maybe cupcakes that were contained in plastic little things. I don't know. Well, we have to kind of think about that and see how we'll do that. But we're going to start in January and we're going to go through February. Is that right?
At least through until February 15th. I have not been in touch with the artist yet. Oh, no, until through March 15th.
March 15th? So
Right.
perhaps a miracle will happen and we actually could have a real cake, but if not, we're going to do something on a Saturday probably. I don't know. We'll see. It's a thing in process right now.
Okay.
Okay, so we're doing some updating. We'll have some familiar faces in the frames and stuff like that. And Ruth is letting us use her architectural quilt that shows the modern library. So that's what we'll be doing for the center wall. Any other questions about that? Okay, then I think that we're at the big thing, the budget. Your show, Jamie. You want to talk to us about budget?
So I presented you a completely level funded budget for FY22. The town had guidance that they wanted a level service budget, and for us, we can do a completely level funded budget for next year. Up at the top with the salary section, there are some contractual obligations that have been taken into account there, and including some step increases, but we now have 2 retirements that have been put in for. So this has opened up some flexibility for us to cover the obligations that we have within the existing salary line. And I worked on some scenarios on how to go about filling those positions per the long range plan that we had already been discussing here at the library basically since 2006. But we'll talk about more specifics once we get closer to when people will actually stop working and looking at job descriptions and those things. But essentially, we can work within what we already have with these existing lines for 21 for 22 as well. The one thing that is not represented here is there's no cost of living increases for non-union personnel. That was also part of the guidance from the town, that those things would be looked at a later date. So we should, take a look at our contractual obligations, put those in there, but no cost of living increases for non-union at this point. It will be discussed at a later date. As far as the expenses down below, those are also all level funded for FY22. We had already been making adjustments over the last few years to keep those lines or get those lines in line with what we were actually spending for those areas. So there's really no need for change there. And like I said, I did leave the water service as it was without knowing where we will be for fiscal 22 with that. So down below, like I said, it's all 0% increase. It's not too exciting. I do have some concern over the materials expenditure requirement that will be coming up for fiscal 22. So based on this appropriated budget, or what would be appropriated, our materials expenditure will end up about $62,400, which represents 16% of the appropriation. So this is part of the state aid to public libraries program where the town needs to meet a certain threshold for supporting library services, which is kind of overall budget, being open a certain number of hours. Part of that also is expending a certain amount of your overall budget on materials. So this is growing, it's climbing higher and higher every year because as budgets go up, the 16% of the appropriation goes up, but we really haven't grown the portion of the budget that we get from the town for materials in quite some time. So what we've always traditionally done is made up the difference with state aid. The concern I have for 22 and really more so going forward is that the state aid funding is about on average $17,000 to $18,000 a year, sometimes a little bit more. I don't know what we're getting for 21 yet, but the state is still working on its budget process. I do know that the governor had some vetoes and they've been going back and forth. I think we'll be getting our awards sometime soon, but the appropriated budget as it stands nearly will exhaust what we receive or what we typically receive in state aid in order to make up that difference, because the budget that's here, within the budget, there's about 41,000 that we put aside for books and updating books, audio, video, and periodicals. The Friends do help with some of our materials expenditure when they support museum passes. That does count towards our materials. So, but it still leaves a deficit of about $16,800. Where in order to meet that municipal appropriation requirement of 62.4, we still would have to come up with 16.8. And that's where typically the state aid is, 17, 18, maybe 19. It's nearly going to exhaust what we get. So we're kind of almost on even swap. There is going to be some flexibility for this year to try to keep our spending levels even because of the situation that's going on, that they have allowed us some flexibility so we can potentially safeguard some of this year's money without knowing what's going to happen yet in fiscal 22. And like I said, I really also look towards fiscal 23. So one of the other things that I provided you to, I'll just show it here so you know which one I'm talking about, is the table that calculates the municipal appropriation requirement going forward. So I think with the budget as it stands, we're going to be okay for 22 in terms of meeting that requirement. So it shows it's based on the municipal funding history. So you see there's 3 tables based on the 3-year average going back in time. But what you don't see here is on the, like kind of on the left, what I do is I have the 3 years prior to come up with these numbers. And then I also project forward. So I'm already looking at 23 in terms of what we would be needing. So that's kind of my bigger concern at this point is I think fiscal 22 we're okay. Depending on what happens with the cost of living increases, we might have slightly more going in, which then will mean what is appropriated for 22 will be higher, which then means your requirement for 23 is higher because it's all based on an average. So like I said, I feel okay about this year's scenario. I'm a little more concerned about the year after, but it's so far away. We have no way to know where we're going to be at. But just I figure I'd put that out there that this year I think we're okay with the level funded budget. Whether or not we can do that for 23 is potentially of a concern.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, I got a question, Jamie.
Mhm.
You're projecting, you said fiscal 23, okay? What are you projecting that to be? Do you know?
Well, assuming there would be any cost of living increase that would be in line with what the union negotiations were already set, I think we're going to end up with an appropriation for 22 at like 392.2.
Yeah,
That assumes that is where we're going to be. And then that will mean for fiscal 23, our municipal appropriation requirement will be 394,274, give or take some change. Because it's all based on what the current year's appropriation ends up being, it's based on a 3-year average. So we had some additional funding put in this year for those education stipends. So that's part of why we ended up at a place where we're okay for this year. But because that money will be there and then any potential cost of living increase, I'm anticipating our appropriation for this year will actually be higher than what I have for the budget because I did level service at the 0%. But if the cost of living increases put in that, we potentially could be closer to 392.2. And then that will mean our MAR for 23 will be 394.3, we'll call it, which is about like 4,300, give or take, over what we have this year. Now, what I did not do is there would be contractual obligations for that following year as well and potential cost of living increases. As I said last year, that's typically enough to get us over that threshold where the state's looking for gradual growth in library appropriations. Usually those increases that are obligations get us to the place where our budget is growing enough where we're meeting those thresholds. But that's assuming that for 23, we'll be able to build in those obligations without then also having to reduce expenses. Like if the level funded budget for 23 is going to be an expectation and we would have to take out of expenses and our bottom line is at 0, then we're not meeting that requirement. It's so far to know. I don't know where the town's thinking in terms of 23.
right. I understand what you're saying. I actually discussed this with Todd about what you just talked about, and he was suggesting maybe we should put a few more $1,000s in either the books or the supply, whatever one you need to meet.
Mhm.
So I think we ought to consider, doing that. I could see it's 31,831, I think it is,
Mhm.
Jamie.
Yep,
So maybe you want to put in, 35,000, something like that,
for 22 even.
for 22. And then
22.
you wouldn't have to worry about it.
Well, we would still have to worry about it for 23 because the 23 is based off of 19, 20, and 21. Well, actually, it's 20, 21, and 22. So
Yeah.
if we put more in for this year, then we'll definitely need more for 23.
Well, I would assume you'd need more for 23 anyways.
Right.
I mean, that's a given. So what you're saying is that um, the additional money right now is something we should not do.
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry. I
Right.
misunderstood.
Yeah, no, it's like I think we have some flexibility
Okay.
to keep level spending for this year,
Mhm.
but I think our fiscal 23 budget will, whether or not the town is going to continue with a level services budget, or if they're going to want, level funded budget, which then means any contractual obligations that we come up in the salaries area, we have to then take from expenses, then we're going to run
Yeah.
into an issue.
So whenever we level fund, if we do it over too many years, then we fall behind. And then
Right.
we have to have a major catch-up year,
Right.
which causes problems because there's such a huge increase to cover
Right.
everything. Yeah, okay. So long as we keep
Right.
this in mind and you're on top of it and the board
But
of
it's like
selectmen.
I think
aware
this
of
year
this.
it's okay where we're running tight with how much we have to use out of state aid, but it's more so next year that I look down the road. Like this year, I feel like, okay, we can work within what we have now. We can make it work on all sides, but then for 23, but it's so hard to know where the situation will be in 23, whether or not we're going to, be able to be level funded or any increases at that point, but we'll need the increases then to meet the requirement, or we're potentially going to be in a waiver situation.
So if we were to receive less than we actually usually get from the state in terms of the grant,
Mhm.
then that would create a problem for us. If they were
We would have to,
same
yeah,
level.
we would have to use some of what we have, because I've been conservative with using the grant funding, we have some there. So
As a backup.
a year or so, but right, I don't know what the award for 21 is going to be. So if it's less than last year and our requirements higher, we're going to need to make up that deficit somehow. So using what we already have in reserves or seeking other grant funds from other resources. That's to make.
Does the Mass Board of Library Commissioners have any kind of anticipation of what's going to happen? Do they think we're going to be shorted?
Well, they're I think they're just taking it 1 year at a time. They just revised the 22 guidelines based on what they're seeing for everyone's budgets for this year. So and they'll do that usually in the fall is when all of these applications are due, and then they revise their policy at the same time for the following year. So I know as of right now, they're offering some flexibility because there are communities that are in situations where they can't meet all of the requirements. But what is really being looked at very closely is whether or not library budgets are not meeting because they're being cut to save money. In that disproportionate cut, they're looking more closely at that because they recognize in some circumstances that, especially with the hours open, some places, depending on what's happening locally in the community, if the library can be open or not, they're offering flexibility with that, with the idea of, if you're in a situation where the local Board of Health says you need to be closed, like they're not counting it against the library for the hours open. but they're encouraging to maintain the material spending and certainly the municipal appropriation. And as long as that is still being kept as best as possible, depending on what's happening overall in the town, it's more when they look at if library budgets are being cut for the town to save money, then that's when it puts you in the situation where you're no longer, you're not going to be certified if your
Yeah, we've been
budget.
down that road before.
Right,
where
right.
We don't
And
want
so
to have to do that
Lakeville has
again.
already faced that where.
Wasn't one of my favorite experiences.
Wasn't a happy day.
No, I mean, it's a difficult situation, and recognizing that it's a balancing act. But that's where I say I think for us, for this year, it's okay. For next year, we're not going to be in a situation where level funding will be okay, potentially.
Okay,
Anything else, Ruth?
I'll make a motion to approve the budget as presented by the library director.
Is there a second?
Second.
Can do a roll call vote on that. Rich LaCamera,
Aye.
Ruth Gross,
Aye.
Nancy LaFave, aye. Thank you, Jamie. It passes.
Good job as usual, Jamie. Thank you.
Yes, and
Yeah.
and the thinking ahead to the future is crucial too, that long range plan idea, even though it's not about policies and things like that, but the financial part is really greatly appreciated by us. Will there be like budget meetings with the selectmen on Zoom? Is that what's
Of
going to
course
happen?
there will be. We'll be
Okay, I just was
scheduling those-
curious.
We'll be
No,
scheduling those probably
No
the
from
first part of
parking lot
February,
meetings, huh?
as soon as we get everything all together.
Okay,
Budgets are coming in. They do, is it tomorrow, Jamie, I think?
They're due Monday.
Monday, okay.
Yeah,
It's
so
gonna be
I'm
the
right
holiday.
up on the deadline with you all, but I knew I'm like, okay, we've got a meeting the 14th and it should be fine to get it in time.
is there anything else other than the next meeting date to come before the Board of Library Trustees? Anyone have anything? Okay, so then we need to look at availability for a Zoom meeting for February.
Almost. No, no.
Amy, if you have anything that you have to attend or be online for, Rich, how about you?
You never know, but pick a date.
Ruth,
First come, first serve.
anybody going on a vacation? No?
I wish. I'd be
Ruth?
out here in a
Yeah,
minute.
Vacation week is the week of the 15th, well, it starts on the 14th, Sunday, the 14th.
yeah, I believe so.
Jamie, you have a student? No travel plans?
Again, no, that'd be nice, but probably not. And although you've been kind of doing the second week anyway, if we maybe just avoid that week just in case.
Vacation week? How about
Yeah, I doubt I'm going anywhere, but whether or not we're just gonna be home as a family, I don't know.
Okay, the second full week. So how about Thursday, the 11th? That's the second
Fine.
full week.
It's good for me.
Good for me.
That's fine
What
for me.
time, Nance?
No doctor's
time?
appointments? Okay,
2
so the
o'clock?
library,
Oh, excuse me.
it's okay. Library
I-
trustees, Thursday, February 11th at 2 p.m.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else further to come before the building, the Board of Trustees, building or anything? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Switch the camera.
Aye.
Ruth Gross?
Aye.
LaFave, aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean and Kevin.